What if I told you that trees once towered over 1,200 feet tall, their colossal trunks piercing the clouds and casting shadows across entire continents? Trees so immense that a single stump could dwarf modern skyscrapers. Look closely at this image. What you've been taught are natural rock columns are actually the petrified remains of giants felled before the mudflood reset. But official history insists they're just basalt or sandstone. What if everything you know about Earth's past is a carefully constructed lie? Stay with me, because today we're pulling back the curtain on the stolen timeline, where forests of mile-high trees ruled the pre-1900 world, only to be buried, erased, and rebranded as geology. I'm going to show you the photographs, the maps, the newspaper reports, and the impossible contradictions that mainstream science cannot explain. By the end of this, you'll never look at a mountain or a rock formation the same way again. This is the forbidden story of the ancient trees that once dominated our planet, and the cataclysm that hid them in plain sight. Let's begin with the visual proof that started it all. Turn your attention to this 1875 survey photograph from the American West. Surveyors stand at the base of what they labeled a colossal stump, its flat top perfectly level, its sides displaying unmistakable radial grain and concentric rings, features no basalt column has ever possessed. The report, buried in dusty archives, measures the diameter at over 300 feet. That's not a tree. That's a mountain disguised as one. How could a living organism reach such scale? The answer lies in an atmosphere and soil far richer than anything we have today. An environment that allowed trees to grow 10, even 20 times taller than our tallest redwoods. Now, layer on the maps. Pre-1900 cartographers documented entire regions labeled Forest of Giant Stumps across North America, Europe, and Asia. These weren't metaphorical. Expeditions in the 1880s returned with sketches showing hundreds of flat-topped columns arranged in perfect geometric patterns, exactly what you'd expect from an ancient managed forest, not random volcanic cooling. Yet modern textbooks dismiss them as columnar jointing, a convenient label that erases the obvious. If these were truly natural rock, why do so many exhibit clean, axe-like cuts at the top, as if harvested by a civilization far older than recorded history? Let's escalate the evidence. In 1887, the San Francisco Chronicle published an eyewitness account from a Montana expedition. Loggers had discovered a petrified trunk measuring 1,200 feet in length, still partially upright, its rings visible under a thin layer of mud. The article describes the wood as perfectly preserved, with bark texture identical to living sequoia, but scaled to impossible proportions. Like its start, about loggers of the day debated its age at over 50,000 years, until the narrative shifted. Suddenly, after 1900, the same formations became Devil's Tower National Monument, officially a volcanic plug. Notice the pattern? The closer we get to the 20th century, the more the story changes. Why? Because the mud flood changed everything. Geological records from the late 1800s show a uniform layer of silt and clay, sometimes 100 feet thick, covering the bases of these stumps worldwide. This wasn't gradual deposition. It was a sudden, cataclysmic burial event around 1850 to 1900 that entombed entire forests in a single generation. Official science calls it alluvial sediment. But look at the photographs. Foundations of old buildings sit atop these mud layers, while the tree stumps protrude through them. Mudflood layer, 1850 to 1900. The timeline doesn't add up. How does a forest of 1,200-foot trees simply disappear from the record? unless it was deliberately erased. Doubt begins to creep in, doesn't it? You were taught that the tallest trees today are under 400 feet because that's the biological limit. Yet here we have photographic proof of stumps 10 times larger, with root systems that once anchored continents. Why would every major geological survey from the 1800s document these giants only for 20th century textbooks to rewrite them as natural wonders? The answer is uncomfortable. The stolen timeline required the removal of any evidence of a pre-reset civilization that lived in harmony with these colossal forests. Let's go deeper with the Tartarian connection. Before the mudflood, the world operated under a different architectural and botanical reality. These giant trees weren't wild, they were cultivated, their wood used in structures whose remnants still puzzle engineers today. Basalt columns with hexagonal fractures? Not cooling lava. Those are the stress patterns of petrified cambium layers under enormous weight. Every continent shows the same signature. North America's Devil's Postpile, Australia's Organ Pipes, Iceland's Svartifoss. All flat-topped, all perfectly level, all surrounded by splintered debris fields that look exactly like felled timber. Global pattern. Same signature on every continent. Quiet outrage builds as the pieces lock together.
They didn't just hide the trees, they hid an entire epoch. Pre-1900 newspapers spoke openly of petrified forests of giants. By 1920, those stories vanished, replaced by volcanic fairy tales. The emotional fracture hits when you realize this wasn't erosion or time. This was a reset, a deliberate burial that allowed a new, smaller humanity to rise on the graves of the old world. Yet the proof remains in plain sight for anyone willing to look past the official narrative. We reach the climax now. Imagine a world where trees reach the stratosphere, oxygenating an atmosphere thick enough to support megafauna at advanced societies. A Tartarian golden age where these living skyscrapers powered free energy systems we can barely comprehend. Then came the mudflood, a liquefied earth event that swallowed the lower 800 feet of every trunk, leaving only the upper stumps exposed as rock formations. The civilization that tended them was wiped from memory, their timeline stolen. The mudflood reset. 1,200-foot trees buried. This wasn't natural disaster. This was the mechanism that rebooted history. Feel that quiet vindication? You're not crazy for seeing the impossible in these images. The evidence ladder we've climbed, photographs, maps, newspapers, geological contradictions, points to one inescapable truth. Earth's past was far grander, far older, and far more engineered than we've been allowed to believe. Keep digging. The next anomaly waiting in the shadows is even more disturbing. The perfectly geometric cities built around these tree stumps before the reset. If these 1,200-foot giants were real, and the proof is undeniable, then what else was buried with them? Drop a comment with the most impossible formation you've spotted near you. The archive is vast, the cover-up is cracking, and the truth is older than they want you to know. Suggested end screen message. The trees were real. The reset was real. Keep watching. Next video tease. Why every mountain on Earth is actually a buried Tartarian tree stump. Next week.